We are live. Welcome, everyone. So you are in for a treat. We have this amazing group of people talking about app and digital tabletop, an exploration of the tools that people use for digital tabletop role playing and LARPing. And we all come from vastly different backgrounds and experiences, and so you should expect a very, very wide-ranging conversation, which I'm very honored and excited to be part of. Um, let's start with introductions. So I'm Raph. I am a UX designer and game designer in San Francisco. You might know me from The Zone, which is a game that was built entirely to be digital and does a bunch of weird things there, which I'll be talking about. Let's go around and meet the rest of our panelists. Momatoes, why don't you start?
So hi, I'm Obedas. I'm an indie RPG designer. Recently, I had a successful Kickstarter arc, but what made people notice was the fact that its character sheet was digital and on Google Sheets. So we are testing out a lot of exciting stuff with it, and I am a big proponent of lo-fi tools, but catering to the environment that the players feel comfortable in. If you'd love to know more, you can always follow my Twitter /Romeros, or I have an AMA at r/RPG on November 1. How about Evie? Let's hear about Evie.
Hi there, everybody. So I got into this a little bit back. I started LARPing in 2015 before I ever got into tabletop games. I'm also probably a little bit of the baby of this group. In 2020, when my monthly LARP could no longer meet in person, I was part of the staff that helped our chapter translate the experience to online tabletop-based events. Now, I had written and run LARP content before, but I had never been a tabletop GM before in my entire life, so I assumed people were going to be paying me to do it for them. So obviously, I wanted to do well. So I hit the runway. I learned every tool I possibly could to make my game stimulating and fun. And as someone more accustomed to being outside, hitting people with sticks than paper and text, I did my best to make what I needed to feel more engaged sitting and looking at a screen. I found so many great platforms and tools, including tools for non-programmers like me, to make experiences for their players. And I'll talk about a few of them today. Not all of them. I have a long list. But I keep on finding more and more creators that amaze and inspire me. And for watching, I hope about today do the same for you, even if you're fairly new.
And Chris, why don't you go next?
Hi, I'm Chris. I think the most popular game I've made is Pigsmoke, but that hasn't got any digital aspects to it. I've made a variety of little tools for helping play games, email bots to run board games on forums. I've made character generation tools in Twine and Excel, and most recently I released a game called C Issue X, which comes packaged with an Excel spreadsheet that does all the card handling for you if you don't feel like scribbling all over a deck of real cards.
And Randy, are you there?
I am here. Hey, my name is Randy Lubin. I am a game designer and entrepreneur out of San Francisco, California. I make consumer games, tabletop storytelling games, and LARP via Diegetic Games, and have also been the creator of StorySynths at storysynth.org, which I've designed to be hopefully as easy as possible to go from idea to playable, prompt-driven storytelling games. So think like For the Queen or The Quiet Year, where you don't need to know how to code as a game designer. You can just put your prompts into a spreadsheet and it automatically generates a game that can then be shared with friends and played live online where everyone sees the same prompts at the same time. Also relevant to this panel, I design serious games for organizations, and over the past year and a half, we've been put a lot of thought into how do we bring these games online for 30, 50, 90 players at a time who might not be used to playing games at all, and how do we support them in creating this playful experience to explore the future or some complex issues. So I'm very excited to geek out on how digital tools can create new types of play.
We have coming to you from all around the world and with all kinds of different things to bring today. Let's start with the first question. So let's say you're a designer and you want to integrate digital into your game. Where should you start?
I think it's a really good question, right? Because as a designer, you do have a lot of like goals, right? Because you want the digital tools to enable you to make the play as frictionless as possible and to make it possible for players across vast distances to come together and play your game. So I think at the bare minimum, you need to look at what would be your base requirements, what are the must-haves versus the nice-to-haves, because you do have to balance it with what your capacity is. Because a lot of designers, a sizable amount comes from the IT background, but not all of them come from like coding, right? So that's why tools like StorySynth from Randy is really cool, and even the Excel spreadsheets that Chris is making. And I think Evie also has some LARP related tools that she's been using that I'd be really fascinated to learn about.
Yeah, I think building on what Momatoes said is if you want to put digital stuff in your game, the first thing you should think about is what is it you want to achieve exactly? As maybe you want to allow people from around the world to play your game together in a sort of integrated and coordinated way. Or maybe you just want something that's going to do all the maths for you, like you're going to have a laptop on a table, push button, attack roll comes out. Because digital is, as I have discovered talking to my fellow panelists in the run up to this, is a very wide field. There's a lot happening in it. And I feel like rather than trying to do everything or trying to do something, nail down what it is you want first.
Yeah, I think it's very fair because it really is that spectrum from like you're playing a normal tabletop game, but there's a couple digital tools in the mix to automate things versus you want to design a fully bespoke experience that could only be played online because of some of the idiosyncrasies of the tools. And so knowing sort of where you want to be, I think is great. I think another key bit of advice is start with the tools you're familiar with. So if you're only familiar with the Google Docs suite, fine, just design in there. There's still a lot of flexibility and power. Don't feel like you need to start learning to code. There's just and I think we're at the beginning of seeing a wave of tools that are very much designed for non-coders that can still be really powerful in terms of sculpting specific experiences. So
And I think Evie, you went through this. You were telling us in the lead up to this of having to figure out this exact question for yourself. I was wondering if you'd be willing to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Randy, you took the words right out of my mouth when you said the tools you're used to start there, because when you are trying to do something for the first time, there's factors that are going to come up that are out of your control. So you want to focus on the experience that you want your players to have, and the experiences that your players are used to too. Knowing the players that you're making the game for and the kinds of things that they like and the kinds of things that they might be willing to branch into for a new experience is really good to know. When I was playing my very first tabletop game that I had run leading up to the one that I would be getting paid for repeatedly over the next several months, I experimented. Every session, I would insert something new. I started with a basic game on Discord. I knew how to use that. I knew how to use a Discord bot, and I started simple. And then I added some voice mod. I added some Discord bots that represented avatars. Start with what you know and add as you go.
Yeah, and I think one of the coolest things I love this trend is that it's almost the entire world of digital tools that we have to use for work are kind of all like yelling at us, like, you must collaborate more, you must use us for everything. And while there are dark implications to that, I think for gaming it's fantastic where, you know, the Google Docs and Google Sheets, and as a designer, I use Figma in my day job. And then Figma comes out with FigJam, which is the really easy to use version of Figma that is explicitly for doing stuff in groups with people who aren't technical. And I can't wait to use that for my next campaign. And so it feels like it's like everyone wants us to make our games more digital, and they're just throwing tools at us. And the hard part is like how to pull them together. The first time I did a playtest of the Zone digitally, I had like the cards in Tabletopia, and then I had the character sheets in a slide deck, and then there was also you've got your Discord, and and getting people to navigate between these different things, like the first challenge, right? But as soon as you get over that, you get these really, really powerful things that you can do. even for something that wasn't even designed in that way.
Yeah, and I do think that kinds of presents like a interesting dichotomy for me is that as gamers we are excellent at jury rigging tools that were not really meant for gaming, like Zoom. Well, Discord is made for gaming, so that kind of helps. But also Google Sheets, Google Calendar for scheduling sessions. But at the same time, while we're jury rigging non-gaming tools, we also have a plethora of digital tools that are meant exactly for gaming. Roll20, Roll, other virtual tabletop platforms. And for me, I find it interesting because I do actually err towards the non-gaming tools because sometimes for me there is some friction and learning curve in a lot of the virtual tabletop tools. So I find it an interesting dilemma that it's easier for me to use non-gaming tools for gaming than the big package massive virtual tabletop that seems to be the trend from a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I think there's something really nice and parallel there just to the regular game design process of sometimes you want to start with a very complex system that lots of people play because it has so many things that you want to use and remix, and so you can take that and adjust it to your needs. But other times your game can be just like very simple and you want to sort of start from basic building blocks because you just don't need all of the other subsystems. And I think like I mean, as you were saying, like the same thing applies to things on the tool side.
Yeah, I kind of want to dig into further into this question actually. It's like, why is it that sometimes it's easier to have someone use a non-gaming tool than to use a gaming tool to play a game? What are some of the attributes?
Simplicity, probably. Um, Collaboration tools that are made for the focus is on collaboration. What you're doing, agnostic. Those tend to be the most accessible to everyone. Not just not just generally accessible, but also disability accessible.
Mhm, mhm.
I think a lot of the tools also tend to be fairly opinionated on the types of games they expect people to play with them. So oftentimes, like they're expecting to see tokens on a map moving around and character sheets and varying degrees of complexity sort of across all that. Sometimes hidden information, which if your game doesn't have all that, you don't need to jump through the hoops to get all that there.
Yeah. Evie did sort of hit it right on the hammer for me. Head of the hammer? English idioms are weird. But yeah, I find the accessibility is extremely important. If obviously as a user you have to go to a completely different tech ecosystem to log in and start using the tools, that's already a friction that would make a user less likely to return to that tool if that kind of tool is instead embedded into the environment where they already feel comfortable in. Like that's why Discord bots are so cool. That's why if you're a streamer, any OBS linking plugin would be fantastic, or something that works with your audio is easier to use. That makes the digital tool adoption much easier. So for a designer, sometimes it's really cool to make something from the ground up, but just making sure you have to be mindful of the adoption, and maybe especially when you're starting out, can you possibly simplify that and move the tool closer to where the user lives? Well, not physically lives. That would be very creepy.
I think that might be it's part of the appeal of something like say the Google suite of documents, sheets, and all the rest of it is that stuff. It's if you've got a web browser, you can go to it, and it all plugs together behind the scenes. And if you do want to get into like coding all the stuff, it's fully featured back there. You can do anything. So you can get someone to go to a Google Doc and then you can bring in whatever other gubbins you need. If you have your game running in a sheet in the background, the user never needs to see it if they're just entering commands in a form or something. So you can hide a lot of the complexity and let people interact with the bits they're comfortable with.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can do with a spreadsheet. I
I
think
love
also,
spreadsheets.
tell us more about your love for spreadsheets.
Um, I just like
That's lyrical.
I just like I was like one of the reasons I wrote the card engine for CSUX in Excel is because it's already programmed to deal with lists of numbers in a very efficient manner. And really, that's all a deck of cards is. It's just a list of values in an arbitrary order. And it's like the software's already halfway to doing what I want. It's a thing that a lot of people already have or can gain access to relatively easily. Yeah, I think that's basically it. It's like it already did most of what I wanted to do, and people can get at it easily. And also, going back to whoever it was who said, work with what you know, it's like I'm already a professional computer toucher. Like, I know how to make Excel do things. So when I'm thinking, what should I do? Should I learn an entirely new system to make this thing? Or should I use the one I'm already pretty good with? So that's why you've got an Excel sheet for it.
Yeah. And I think if you'll allow me to share my screen, I did also manage to make the character sheet on Google Sheet that I hope was like a working prototype that proves that Google Sheet doesn't have to be unsexy. You can actually make it look quite good. Now, I wonder if it is showing on our panel properly, but I'm just gonna trust our digital tools to handle that. So in this character sheet, it's basically the same Google Sheets, but highlighting over specific fields will show the rules. It's basically like a built-in SRD with your character sheet already. And some basic formatting, just changing that will change the design in some ways and auto-compute the target numbers for your roles. Like it changes to two, some nice fields that you could play around with. And of course, using the hover tools, you basically have a built-in SRD and everything is in Google Sheets. So the ramp up to learning how to use it is not quite as severe as if you tried learning Java for a Discord bot. So I've been fairly proud of it, but just because it's on Google Sheet also doesn't mean that you can't use it as a launching pad for something much more complicated. One of the cooler things that we've been able to do with a Discord bot is that it can actually import and export data from the Google Sheet character sheet. So that means that you can make roles using the Google Sheet that you already have. You can generate random characters and save it to a brand new sheet. And then start sending the JSON data between the Discord bot, Roll20, or any API that will use that same format. It gets quite technical, but basically just having your data in a spreadsheet format, in a machine readable format, that means that in the future, when you are much more technically adept, or if you have money to throw at somebody who is technically adept, you can start building much more wonderful things off it. But starting small is already a good foundation.
I also just love how amazing those visuals are, and that you were able to get such phenomenal visual design in a spreadsheet is just amazing.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
I want to
that
use
gets
that bot.
another thing that I find really interesting to think about with these tools, and which I love about like that work that you did specifically, Momatoes, is I always likened like using during the pandemic, right, going on a first date online. And so there'd be this question that would come up, which is, well, do you use Zoom or do you use, something else? And so part of it was, if I use the same tool that I've been sitting in at work all day, is it kind of like going on a date in your company cafeteria? Like, that doesn't sound great.
Oh dear.
So sometimes you need like a completely different setting, just for the feeling of it, right? Just for that sense of separation. And I think people have been seeing spreadsheets that look like work spreadsheets for so long that I think many people don't even really know that it's possible to do things like turn off the grid lines and completely control the visuals of it, so you can not feel like you're kind of role playing in your company cafeteria. Hey everyone, come to my office and we're just gonna play there. Says
Yeah, because a few months back, I did some research like what was the earliest Google Sheet somebody made for an RPG. I found one during the beta testing of 5th Ed. So when I loaded it up, it had a giant red disclaimer that when you are printing, make sure that the margins are set to these exact parameters. Do not copyrighted something something. So it's funny because when we were making digital tools before, we were conceptualizing it how to adapt that digital to our physical use. Like we have Google Sheets, we have spreadsheets and random table rollers, but we were already thinking this would be cool if only we can print it out and bring it to our table. But now with the recent years, that's kind of flipped over its head. Like how instead of bringing the digital to the table, we're now bringing the table to the digital realm.
I think that gets at another theme that we talked about discussing in this section, which is just the landscape of digital games. So existing tool, but what are some games that, or other ways that we can think about digital games that are completely digital native? Um, I think one game that we talked about in our prep call was this Discord has a ghost in it, which I haven't played.
I haven't played that either, but it sounds cool.
I think by Will Jobs and World Game Champ Company. Basically, there are two types of players. The investigators can only talk in the voice channel. The ghosts can only type in the text channels. And they're gonna try to figure out what is the cause why the ghosts are haunting the place. And the ghosts will try to figure out what exactly will spook the investigators. So that kind of asynchronous role in a digital game makes it a fantastic use case for how digital can make sure that each player has a unique role and that the tools enable them to carry it out.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to asymmetric multiplayer video games in that regard, in that each player is given, here is your kit, now go do the thing you're supposed to do as best you can with that.
I really love it when games get creative with that. Some limitations on some players and some in different ways over here. It just it makes it just more more, I don't know. It's like a dance. You know what I mean? Like I like it when games have those different limitations for different people present. You know what I mean? It's always a cool thing.
I think this is actually a pretty good segue into our next section, which is just about like what are some of the things that you can do with digital that you can't do in a normal setting. What are the, we're going to talk a little about challenges and opportunities, but that really seems like a good example of something that is so much easier to do when you have a little bit of technology to help you.
You know, it's funny. When I was first, when Dystopia Rising was first pivoting to virtual events during the pandemic, I got so excited. I was the only one on the team who had never actually been a GM for tabletop games before, and I made this long list of things that we could do with tabletop games that we couldn't do at LARP. And I came to the first meeting so excited to tell them all about these things that we could do that they had definitely all done before in their own tabletop games that they had run. And I had this moment of realization like, oh, yeah, we could play on airships, guys. We can do all this stuff that we can't do at a physical campsite. And yeah, they already knew. I was the only one that this was a novel concept too.
I think that gets at a really interesting um, difference there, where I think in LARP it's perfectly normal to just be in a conference room, but have the skills to imagine that you're in an airship. And when you, at least my experience over the last year has been, there's a kind of different set of suspension of disbelief parameters almost. It's like, well, you can't really move around so much. It doesn't feel quite as natural. Like at least in the airship, we're like hanging out in an airship. Airships have rooms. We can move around in an airship. But if we're stuck in front of a computer, suddenly there are certain things that are harder to suspend disbelief of, even with all the fancy technology we have.
Taking
Yeah,
your
one thing that oh sorry.
no, go ahead.
One thing that digital tools can't quite do for me yet is the really satisfying thunk of the dice when you start rolling it. Like I haven't found any digital roller that really mimics that kind of super satisfying feeling.
So to take it in the other direction of like the what do digital tools do really well and what might they enable that or wouldn't be easy to do just purely analog. I'll just like rattle off a list of things that excite me. But I think like digital tools are great for taking a bunch of different inputs and randomizing lots of suggestions and fodder. And if you don't like the suggestion, you just can keep like re-randomize until you have the perfect inspiration for the thing you want to say. So it's great for scaffolding creativity. I think it's also really great for tracking complex state. So I don't think I've seen one yet, but I'm really excited for someone to make a game that has a huge simulation under the back end of a city, a civilization, whatever it might be. But then people are still very much doing a real-time storytelling game around that, but they're just able to then do things that then update the simulation and come back. We've done small versions of that in some of our serious games. So like we've had a computer simulation of an election and voter model in the background as players are sort of LARPing out the election and things are updating in real time. Other quick hits of like things I love to see. I mean, I think despite not being able to do the clunk of the dice well, computers are so good at other bits of production value, amazing visuals and audio to bring things to life. And I think some of you who have used that on the jamming side, I'd love to hear from you on that in a second. But I think other things that digital does well is like you have a phenomenal infinite canvas. So I've played in games where we could really take advantage of it, that there's like no limit to how many either visual reference points and artifacts we can add to the sort of infinite canvas, or being able to zoom in and zoom out of different key bits of information when we need it. And it's a nice removal of a constraint in terms of getting ideas out there and collaborating and having this like shared imagination space.
I think what it's almost something that gets lost with computers, but also it could. I don't think I've ever seen it used. It came up briefly in the pre-call with momatoes about how when you're talking to someone via a computer, you don't know what's happening around them. Like you've got this teeny little window into their life, and that selective control of information is kind of what's happening there. To kind of, I think it builds a bit on what Evie was saying a moment ago about different players being put into different roles. Um, I don't think I've seen a game that leans on that, but it could. Like you're playing, you're on a video call with someone and they disappear. It's like, what's happened to them? You don't know. Were they ever there? Were they ever real? Who knows? Um, I feel like that's an area that could be developed. Like I see games kind of pointing towards it, but I don't know of one that uses it.
Yeah, I'm having flashbacks to like play by posts in forums, in Yahoo groups, and distribution lists, right? Because in a way, we are kind of echoing back to that we can only see what they choose to reveal through the emails that they send or the forum posts that they make. Now we've added a more visual multimedia component to that. But as you mentioned, Chris, there is still that selective revelation of information, and you can still opt to modify how that information is presented to create the theater of the mind in a virtual platform. So in a way, while there is much more tools available, the basic component of us still making stories, sharing words, and now sharing pictures, having infinite canvas to post our inspirations and music, it's still being replicated, but hopefully much more effectively than before. And of course, opening exciting new possibilities.
You've just given me an idea. It's a free one for the designers in the audience. Something you can do with the digital setup, not real time, I don't think, but if you're doing something with, say, emails, is the players email their moves or whatnot to the GM. The GM can do whatever they like with that information and then forward it on to everyone else. And so you can introduce any amount of uncertainty you feel like into a game that way, which you can't do when everyone's sitting around a table because when who's it over there has just done. He's like, You know, they say I'm gonna stab Chris in the back about now. It's like, better get out my back shield. Yeah, I think again, I don't. It feels like an idea. It feels like there's a design space there that I haven't done anything with, but could be used by someone.
Like an RP prisoner's dilemma.
Kinda, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fantastic because digital tools have utility for playing or GMing, but for the game designer, now you have more aspects to consider if you want to incorporate digital tools in your design, controlling information, how that information will be presented and where, if it will be Discord channels or emails, and the release of the timing. So it's cool, especially when we can use fairly lo-fi tools to string it together. Email, Google Sheets, Pigeon. I don't know. No, they don't count as digital yet, but but there are much more many tools. But I also think that's the challenge, knowing how to weave them together, because obviously some tools are not gonna work quite well together. Like if you use Microsoft Teams, God help you, I don't know how you can integrate that with anything outside of Office 365. But like with Discord bots, how you can make sure it integrates with other sources of data or within the Google document ecosystem.
I mean, now I'm just imagining the part of the game being just fighting the user interface of Microsoft Teams as it
Gotta take
without
down
doing
Clippy.
anything. Yeah. I mean, it makes me think too about like just in general, like what are some things that the roles that are normally filled by a GM or by players that the tool can just like completely take off their hands. Like randomness is such an obvious one, right? Like that's such a that like so much of like gaming technology is like injecting randomness into the conversation. Um, and even just having at this point, I don't even know where my dice are. Every time I'm playing a game and I need to, roll a d20, I'm like, oh, crap. Like, go open my phone, open Google, and they have a d20 roller on the front page. So
Well,
I feel like I've just kind of lost my game cred here.
one of the things I really love that you've done with the zone is how you've integrated the rules and tutorials along the way, which is like typically a GM responsibility is to know all those rules. And do you want to describe a little bit how you did that and how it works for players?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I playtested, so I playtested the zone extensively. In fact, like the first time I playtested it was Metatopia 2 or 3 or 19 years ago. However long has passed since it was possible to come to Metatopia. Time has no meaning. And being a UX designer by trade, I spend a lot of time thinking about onboarding. That's one of the things that you realize like half of the design is the design, and the other half of the design is getting people to the design. And then the other half of the design, because yes, there's more than 100% of a design, is just like all of the cases when things go wrong, right? That you have to handle. There's all this stuff under the surface, this kind of Lovecraftian void of onboarding and error handling. And so every time I do a playtest, I'd have a rough script and I would run through the script of how I wanted to introduce the game. And then I would carefully note, like, oh, when I introduce this rule before this other rule, then people seem a little bit more bored during that explanation because they're not motivated. It's like they've learned about characters before they've learned about the goal of the game. So they're creating the characters, they don't really know why, and so on. But if you flip them, then suddenly they know the goal of the game, but then they're excited to get to their characters, so they're not really paying as much attention to the rules at the beginning, so they don't have the investment of having a character yet. So anyway, spent a long time playtesting that, and the best technology I had was, the booklet, right, that you go through. You'd still see like one of the prototype ones, which is like so many like annotations of like put this section here and switch these. And the coolest thing so when I took the zone, and if you don't know the zone, basically, if you like Annihilation or Stalker, it's like Picnic. It's like a game of magical horror where a group of doomed, desperate souls go into a zone that is rumored to be able to grant your deepest wish. and it is fated at the beginning that only one of them will make it. And so it's a play to lose game where there's just, there's a ring of cards and your death is fated. Like it will happen when you flip the card that has your name on it. And so when I adapted that from a card game to digital, the coolest thing about it was that I was able to take all of that work from the booklet that had been like play tested to death, but still required a person, like the facilitator, to perform that and run people through it and kind of make people read it in the right order, and just have the game do that instead. So when you go through the game, at the beginning, there's the intro slides are like carefully designed to show you just the right piece of information at the right time. And then the other half of the rules are introduced as you're playing. So you flip a card, and if it's the first time you see it, there'll be a little tooltip that's like, hey, here's the rule that you should do. And then from the playtesting, I knew which parts were hardest to grok. And so there's certain sections where it'll just kind of take you out of the game for a section as a group, and it'll be like, hey, we're going to do a little exercise together. It's a guided exercise. It's been play tested. So I have some confidence that it'll teach you this rule, and then it'll bring you back. And no facilitator, because this is the hardest thing I think about playing games with friends, is having that painful moment, those like 30 minutes at the beginning where you're just like explaining the rules and you start wondering if your friends just want to kill you. They're just like, why do you hate me so much? So I think from a social perspective, I actually really like that you can take that painful part away from the people and make it a shared responsibility, so that we're all just suffering the rules together and they can get into it. And it's cool that you can kind of weave it in to the tool like right at the moment where you need it, because that's way harder to do in a physical game, because games that try to do that, like Gloomhaven, like they get there by having like 3 hours of setup, of organizing the cards on your table, and if like you knock the table with your leg, then the whole game falls apart. So yeah, those are some of the things that were really exciting for me about getting to take a physical game and make it digital.
Yeah, and there are depending on like how advanced you can make it. I mean, we were talking about starting with what you know, but with some technical skills, some familiarity with like basic programming concepts, you can step it up a bit. Like one fun project I did was I looked up I think it was a Markov chain generator using a Python. So basically, I loaded a bunch of ominous story seeds, and then I let the engine spit out dozens and hundreds more of similar story seeds. So instead of manually making a D100 table of story seeds, suddenly I had D500, and they were just slightly off kilter, that they were actually fairly mysterious. But this also builds upon what Raph said, that it massively reduced the headache, streamlined a couple of cool things, and now I can say that a story could begin with like a grandmother finding the heart of their child in a mango tree while blue flowers are blooming around them. So it was that kind of prompt that was being spat out by the Markov chain generator. It's pretty cool.
Momatoes, am I right that you also did a community kind of engagement around that where people were submitting prompts?
Yeah. Basically, I needed to have a good core corpus. Is that the proper phrase? Of key phrases that it could feed off, because if you feed the Python, I forgot the specific term, the Python algorithm, it would keep spitting out repetitive sentence structures. So you had to have a good variety in it. So I sourced about maybe 50 to 70 suggestions, and then I added in maybe twice as maybe 50 from myself as well. And then the results were pretty cool. If you have a browser, you can go to doom.quest. It's not an optimized website, but it would show those machine generated, but not machine learning. Don't let anyone fool you into thinking that story prompts.
The machine will not learn. It will refuse to learn. I think
Yeah.
something I really I thought was cool about that which I think is also something that you can do with digital tools that's harder to do with a physical game. So if you think about making a physical game and wanting community engagement and doing things like random tables and stuff like that, you can do that, but it's this much higher stakes thing where there's limited space and you have to kind of choose, and it's going to be a one print of the book, and you can't really change it afterwards. And so one thing I thought was really cool when you were doing that was the idea that it's more of a dynamic thing. It's like the community's engaged. You could potentially add more prompts later if someone has a cool idea. If there's a prompt that ends up not really working so well, you can remove it over time. So the fluidity that when you have a digital game, it also means that you can kind of update it and change it and kind of respond to how people are playing it over time, which is pretty amazing.
You release
Yeah.
your game as a wiki. Just thoroughly cross-reference everything, and then you can tweak whatever little bits you need as you go.
I love it when games do that. I only recently stumbled upon games that were doing that. Games that, for example, had let's see. Right now in the One More Multiverse server, there are a few games like this where they have a large player base, and just the first however many people who sign up that week get to play that week, and they have a wiki where you can continually update your own players' information. And I really love that because if you're new to the game, you can read about the players that you're going to be playing with. You can read about everything that's in the background, everything the character would know. I love that approach.
I want a TTRPG that's like half SRD, half AO3.
Yeah, tagging is also a really powerful thing if we're talking about information storage for like RPGs. Like it's fairly low key, but one website I configured because I don't I have too many hobbies. Basically added tags. It was basically a database of games by Southeast Asian creators, and it had tags for genre, but it also had tags for mood and other miscellaneous tags. And I found that even with a really dumb plugin that would try to search similarities between tags, having an additional dimension of mood already made it much more likely for you to discover other similar games. So I thought that was pretty cool. Like even relatively low key enhancements to metadata to a wiki, and if it's AO3, adding that important tag so people know where to get their spicy fanfic, can make a digital tool much more usable and also more accessible as well for people with disabled folks.
Yeah, the idea that you can use, obviously if you have like a properly formatted PDF, a screen reader can read that, but a fully accessible game they can play with just your keyboard, like there's ways to make these things more accessible even than any game beforehand. I also think like the cognitive accessibility of getting into a game is like a big deal. I am terrified when I see a 700,000 page D&D book come around the corner. I'm like, well, I'm going to get my graduate degree and then I will be able to DM it for my friends. I know I'm exaggerating, but it's a lot of work. And so the ability to give you a more interactive onboarding to the thing is
Even
something
if it's
I love.
even if it's just the ability to tell you about rules as they become relevant and not before.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, you can have a 700-page tome of rules, and it will just tell you you need to know this now, and the rest of it, nah, whatever. Um, yeah,
yeah, and actually, that's one of the interesting things about that too is that there's a reason that the game is complex for a reason, but with more complexity are more paths through it, and so a linear text isn't going to have the optimal path for everyone. And so as soon as you can vary it up and hyperlink it, you can help people find their path more easily.
Yeah, the onboarding process is so crucial for people like me who are still like I haven't spent my whole life doing this. Every system I learn might well be new to me. And a system that's arranged for someone like, okay, so this is what you need to know now, and just being able to learn as you go, but also be able to get the full experience the whole time, basically is huge. One More Multiverse does that extremely well.
First is it a virtual tabletop like Roll20?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
let
As
us
a matter
know
of
about
fact,
it.
yeah, that's probably the most exciting virtual tool I personally have come across. I am someone, and my video might cut out a little bit right now, but I love in general tools that you probably can't. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
can hear
We
Okay,
you.
you can
can't
still
see you at the
hear me.
moment.
It will come back up here in a little bit. I like delightful tools where you can do cool things that just put a little bit of, zing into your game. Um, I like things like let me see. I like voice changers. I don't know if you can hear that. Can you hear that?
Yep, loud and
I'm a
clear.
robot.
Hmm.
Yeah, I love stuff like that. And one tool that has been the most delightful, and let me go ahead and screen share. Let me grab that on the multiverse. And here we go. Let me get back to that window so that I can show you what I like so much about it. And I'm not going to be able to get through this entire kind of what this is, but there's my little character that I made. Here are a bunch of NPCs that I can control, and just that little bit. Everything here is customizable. There's even animations. Like, this is a very complex way to go about making your digital tabletop game, but there's a place somewhere in here for character sheets. Um, there let's see, there are so very many tools. You can draw on your map. You can measure distances. Let's see, there's just so much you can do. Everything you see here is completely customizable. You can upload your own art and assets. You can use tile sets that you find for free online. There is just so much. You can make word balloons. Let's see, boo, enter. You can make notes for your players. There you go.
It looks like our screen shares have not been shown through on Twitch,
Oh, they
unfortunately.
haven't? Oh no.
Oh,
Well, in that case, let me look at that window where I've got the Twitch pulled up and see if something else that I can do will work better. Oh yeah, definitely not there. But luckily, I can set up my virtual camera on OBS real quick, switch over. It'll take me just a minute. This is
Yeah,
this is very
everyone who was
very
listening but couldn't see, it's really cool.
yeah.
these are the digital tools that we're talking about, really. Like having OBS point a fake camera at a screen so you can screen share because the screen share thing in Discord isn't working properly. Like,
Is that working right there? Am
It
I back?
yeah,
is.
I feel I may be backwards on the stream, but I think largely that's okay. The only thing that's going to be backward is text. But yeah, if I hope you're able to see that, those that are watching.
Thumbs up.
This what?
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Okay, great. Yeah, I left this little note for my players. I can move my character around. I can draw on the screen. There's a place that I can't quite remember where the place is for character sheets. Maybe up here. Yeah, up here. Character sheets. There is a friend that wait, that's not. I've slept several times since the last time I actually used this, and I have my masks game that I'm going to run on this in the next month or so. I'm still working on it, but I'm going to. There's so many games that are being run all the time in the store, more and more. Um, Oops, I don't know what I just clicked on. What did I just click on? Oops. Let's see if I can get back to what I was doing here. Well, basically, that is the most exciting tool that I have used so far. I'm going to go back to the Just Me and maybe pull it up again in a few minutes. But yeah, if anybody has questions about it, just let me know. Their Discord is also incredibly helpful and full, and it's a very hopping place. So yeah, if you're interested in running a very immersive type of game where your characters can move spatially in an environment, which is something that I personally have really missed during the pandemic, that is the most exciting tool that I've used. I've also seen people run LARPs and similar games make escape rooms on, for example, Gather and Topia. Some people like to either have after game events or use them to have like one-off. Like during the game, someone used one game runner I know used Topia to plant, items around the map and involve them in a puzzle. Players could go and spatially walk their avatar around, find the item, take down the notes, and bring it back to complete a puzzle when they went back to the Discord version of the game. Um, I love, I love spatial. I love spatial platforms. That's my point.
Thank you for that demo. With 10 minutes left, it feels like this might be a good time to switch into our next topic, which is just what are our future hopes? What are our hopes and dreams for what digital tools can bring to the table in the future?
I can jump in to start. I mean, as someone who's spent a bunch of time trying to make story synth as easy as possible for people who aren't technical. I feel like as no code tools, no code being the sort of buzzword for in the work environment, how people who can't code can start suddenly creating things, full applications, full automations without knowing how to code. I think as those become more accessible and more powerful, we're gonna be able to do way cooler things way faster in our game design without having to become like experts at whatever topic, whether it's code or something else. And what I think these tools are really good for, I mean, they're good for two buckets of things at least, if not more. They're good at creating quick automations, which could be great at taking games that would be maybe too complex for most tables otherwise, but making them accessible. And then separately, I think they're really good as pipes between different applications. And so momatoes has already given a bunch of examples of like using the Discord bot to talk to the Google spreadsheet to talk to wherever else. And I think we're just going to see all of that become easier and easier, and we'll just be more empowered to glue all of these tools together in really powerful ways. I guess my other hope, and it's something that I've already seen a bit, and I think I'll just continue, is one thing both digital tools are really good at, and I think a lot of the game design scene that we're a part of values is the ability to remix. And so I think we're just going to see more and more game designers creating their thing, but then also sharing the open source version of all their digital tools so that other people can be inspired and more quickly start designing. So they're not suddenly, if they're designing their first game, they're not starting with a blank canvas. They're able to say, okay, how do I take this thing I already know I enjoy and start tweaking it to my taste? I know you, Raph, you might want to chime in a bit with how you've been enabling that type of behavior with the zone, but I think like just lowering the barrier to having people design their own experience, customize their own experience is just going to get easier and more powerful.
Yeah, actually, one of the things that I think is it's one of the coolest things about StorySynth is the fact that it's based on a spreadsheet, and you just kind of paste your link to the spreadsheet into StorySynth. It generates the game based on that, and it's like a huge creative restriction, and great design comes from restrictions, and it makes it so remixable. And by definition, if you want to, it's already shareable. It's already in a spreadsheet.
Yeah, it's go
And
file, make a copy, and you're off making your own fork of the game.
yeah, so after building, after I released the zone, I spent a few months essentially having to like ship of Theseus it in order to do the same thing, because I wanted people to be able to remix it as well and hack it. And there's so many ways you can do that. And in the end, I ended up taking the same model as Randy and making it so that all of the content from the zone is in a spreadsheet. It's available on the website, and you can just tweak anything, load it in, and you've got your own zone. You can change the location cards and the scenes and the not so easy cards that are like that's how it does randomization. You can change the color theme, you can change the intro, you can kind of basically like turn it into a completely new game. And I actually think one of the coolest things about doing it with a spreadsheet is when I compare it to the experience of building out and testing the zone in Tabletopia, for example. Like you're just manually clicking through menus, painstakingly, like dragging pictures into the card creator one at a time. And there's just so much friction to doing that even if you did release all of your stuff, it would the bar to remixing it would take like a whole day instead of 5 minutes. And so I've been really inspired by that. I've been inspired by too. It's kind of like when someone releases just a plain text version of their game, right? Um, so releasing your game in the nicely formatted version, then also releasing like the the stuff it's made of, the atoms of it, for other people to play with is really interesting to me. So yeah, so I'm gonna stop talking. There's so many things to be excited about. What about y'all?
It's a very big
Yeah,
topic.
It
it
is.
is.
Mhm.
I think someday I'd love something like what Randy and also Raph mentioned. Like, what if we could have tools like Lego blocks that we could make it modular? The data could transfer between different tools or maybe different functionalities, or maybe like Evie can import her cool flame hand so that it will also show up in her character in one more multiverse. So, really, that's the exciting but also incredibly difficult path ahead for digital features that I'm looking forward to.
I have thought about this so much, and I have like this vision for what I want. One day, I want to be able to do things that feel like I want to be able to sit in my mom's living room and, virtually in AR and look at her real eyes with my real eyes, make real eye contact. I want to be able to wear a digital costume in AR that I designed. I want to be able to put my AR glasses on, put my digital costume on, and walk around an AR space that's been like turned from a simple space into something that I put on my AR glasses and comes to life. And I want that, and I think it's going to happen not just within our lifetimes, but probably within the next decade. Someone who was my Andy, who was my facilitator last night, sent me this tweet where someone had designed this amazing, beautiful AR cloth that someone was wearing, and oh man, like it's coming, it's on its way, and that's like more of a future oriented and less like what are the tools I can use today kind of thing. But like the first LARP that uses AR costuming and uses AR environments that is actually accessible once AR glasses are more accessible and ubiquitous for the average person in games. Like, I want to be there. I want to do that. I want to be on that staff. I want to be there. And I'm so excited about it. Obviously.
Chris, what about you?
Who, me? Um, Gonna take an opposite angle to Randy. I think there's like there's a lot of opportunity. I think for people who don't know how to code to get into this sort of stuff and create things. And I'm interested in seeing what the experts come up with. Like people who do know how to do this stuff. Like what happens if you find someone who really knows your data integration protocols and whatnot and applies that to role playing games? Like I'm sure they could create something incredibly useful if they haven't already.
I think we're seeing more and more of that as people start really realizing. Like, I think at this point, our culture has realized things that are used to make games are actually incredible technologies that are useful for other things. And there's so much more crossover, and it's just going to get better.
Yeah.
Like, did you know you could use your computer for work? Like,
Yeah, that is an amazing line to end it on. In our last minute, why don't let's all go around and remind people who we are and where you can be found on the internet.
I'll start again. So I'm Momatoes. You can find me on Twitter / or at Momatoes, and I'll also be having an AMA on r/RPG on Reddit on November 1. So you can talk to me there about digital tools or whatever.
I'm Evie. I am GV Guide, like TV Guide, except with a G at the front, pretty much everywhere. I recently started a Twitter so that I could keep up with everyone who is already on Twitter, getting with the time. So, GV Guide, and I'm Evie.
I'm Chris. I can be found around the internet as Potato Cubed, or sometimes as Real Potato Cubed, because some oik has nicked my username already.
And I am Randy Lubin. You can find me everywhere on the internet as Randy Lubin, at Randy Lubin on Twitter. I create consumer games under Diegetic Games and serious games for organizations under Leverage Play. And I'm always happy to talk digital tools, so don't hesitate to reach out.
I'm Raph, Raph D'Amico, everywhere on the internet. And if you want to check out the Zone, it's at thezonerpg.com. And oh my God, I want all the features we've designed to come into existence.
Thanks so much for tuning in, folks.
Thank you all.